loss treatment has become a remarkably crowded marketplace. Tablets, lotions, injections, lasers, nutritional supplements, microneedling devices, growth factor preparations and exosomes are all promoted with impressive photographs and even more impressive promises. But there is an important question that patients rarely ask. Are all these treatments supported by the same quality of scientific evidence? The answer is no. An expensive treatment is not necessarily an effective treatment. Conversely, some of the best supported treatments for androgenic alopecia are relatively inexpensive medicines that have been available for decades. And that is where they're made to lose their luster. Rather than ranking treatments according to price, popularity, packaging, or social media visibility, let us rank them for once according to the strength of scientific evidence. The first principle of hair loss management is diagnose before you treat. Before discussing treatment, we must establish what type of hair loss we are treating. Androgenic alopecia is not the same as telogen effluvium, alopecia areata, nutritional hair loss, traction alopecia, or scarring alopecia. A treatment that benefits one condition may be ineffective or occasionally inappropriate for another. Once androgenic alopecia has been diagnosed, its treatment can be broadly placed on an evidence ladder. And that's what we're going to discuss today. Finasteride, dutasteride, and minoxidil at the top of the evidence ladder are treatments that have been studied repeatedly in controlled clinical trials. Finasteride and dutasteride, as we all know, reduce the conversion of testosterone to its active metabolite DHT, and in genetically susceptible individuals, DHT drives progressive miniaturization of follicles. Minoxidil works differently. It does not control DHT. Instead, it supports follicular activity, prolongs the anagen phase of the growth phase of the follicular cycle, and may increase the diameter and the performance of miniaturized follicles. And this distinction is fundamental. One group of medicines attempt to reduce the genetic pressure, the other helps the remaining follicles to perform better. A 2025 network meta-analysis comparing multiple medical treatments found dutasteride produce a proportionate increase in adverse effects, but it does demand greater clinical discretion. Benefit, systemic exposure, long-term requirements, and potential side effects must all be weighed together. In other words, the strongest hammer is not required for every nail. Oral minoxidil has become exceedingly popular, partly because it is convenient and partly because social media often presents it as more powerful than topical minoxidil. The scientific evidence here is more nuanced. In a 2024 randomized clinical trial, men with androgenic alopecia received either 5% topical minoxidil or oral minoxidil 5 mg once a night. In a 2024 randomized clinical trial, men with androgenic alopecia received 5 mg oral minoxidil at night or topical minoxidil 5% twice a day. Oral minoxidil did not demonstrate overall superiority. This does not mean that oral minoxidil is ineffective. It means that convenience should not be confused with superiority. Oral minoxidil can be very useful for patients who cannot tolerate the residue, irritation, or inconvenience of topical minoxidil treatment. However, because it is systemic, unwanted facial or body hair, ankle swelling, changes in blood pressure, and an increased heart rate must be considered. The correct treatment is not merely what appears to be the strongest. It is the one that provides an acceptable balance of efficacy, safety, and long-term adherence for that particular patient. Combination treatment is scientifically logical because androgenic alopecia has more than one therapeutic agent. Finasteride or dutasteride address androgen-mediated miniaturization. Minoxidil supports follicular growth. And when appropriately combined, they complement one another and will often produce a better result than either of them used alone. A 2025 meta-analysis examined 7 randomized controlled trials involving 396 men. A topical finasteride minoxidil combination produced an average improvement in hair density of approximately 9.22 hairs per square centimeter over minoxidil alone. Hair diameter and global photographic assessment also favored the combination, although sample sizes were small and heterogeneity was substantial in some outcomes. This is encouraging, but adding more treatments does not guarantee proportionately more hair. It may also increase cost, complexity, and the possibility of poor compliance. We are not treating a prescription, we are treating a patient. A complicated regimen that performs impressively on paper but is abandoned after 3 months is less useful than a simpler regimen that a patient can follow for several years. In long-term hair loss management, compliance is often the elephant in the room. PRP is one of the most frequently offered treatments in the domain of androgenic alopecia. It is recommended before a hair transplant, during a hair transplant, after a hair transplant, and when hair transplant is not required at all. PRP has become so firmly embedded in the vocabulary of hair loss sufferers that it almost invariably enters the consultation. A systematic review found that PRP increased hair density by an average of approximately 25.6 hairs per centimeter square compared with saline injections over a medium-term follow-up. However, the 95% confidence interval ranged from approximately 2.6 to 48.6 hairs per square centimeter, and the quality of evidence was rated as low because of inconsistency and risk of bias. The confidence interval is telling. The true benefit could be modest or considerably larger. The available studies do not allow us to assess it precisely. This illustrates an important lesson in medical statistics. A large number looks impressive, but a number is only as reliable as the studies it came from. Give me the data and I will torture it till it confesses to the conclusion I was looking for. There is also no universally standardized PRP preparation. Clinics differ in the volume of blood collected, platelet concentration, centrifugation technique, activation method, injection depth, number of sessions and intervals between sessions. Therefore, two treatments carrying the same label of PRP may not be biologically equivalent. In my opinion, PRP may be considered as an adjunct in selected patients, but it should not be sold as a substitute to DHT blockers. PRP may stimulate a follicle, but it does not remove the genetic or hormonal pressure that is progressively miniaturizing the follicle. Microneedling creates controlled punctures over the scalp. It may activate wound healing pathways and may temporarily increase the penetration of topical minoxidil. A 2025 meta-analysis identified 12 randomized trials involving 631 patients. Microneedling combined with minoxidil improved hair count and hair shaft diameter compared with minoxidil alone. However, heterogeneity for hair count outcomes was high at approximately 88%, meaning that the results differed considerably between studies. And this variation is not surprising. Studies have used different needle depths, devices, treatment intervals, endpoints, and minoxidil protocols. It is therefore scientifically incorrect to speak of microneedling as though every derma roller, every needle depth, and every treatment schedule produces the same biological effect. Microneedling may be a useful adjunct when performed with an appropriate device, proper depth, frequency, and sterile technique. However, deeper or more frequent treatment is not necessarily more effective. Over-enthusiastic treatment, on the other hand, can cause inflammation, infection, bleeding, follicular damage, and microscarring. And this concern is particularly relevant when patients use poorly sterilized equipment, domestic devices bought on Amazon, without understanding depth, frequency, or sterility. In my clinical opinion, born out of years of practice treating hair loss, repeated microneedling sessions can produce cumulative microscopic scarring. And over time, this may reduce scalp permeability, diminishing the penetration and therefore the effectiveness of topical minoxidil. Therefore, at times, over-enthusiasm needs a seatbelt. Low-level laser therapy or light therapy may be delivered through combs, through helmets, or through caps. Some controlled studies have shown improvements in hair density, suggesting that these devices may improve biological activity of follicles. However, the devices are not uniform. They differ in wavelength, they differ in power, in energy delivered to the scalp, treatment duration, and frequency. Results obtained with one machine cannot automatically be transferred to every red light helmet sold online. When evaluating device-based studies, we must also examine study size, blinding, the choice of control group, funding, and conflicts of interest. But commercial sponsorship does not automatically invalidate a study, but it should make us examine the methodology more carefully. A polished device should not be allowed to dazzle the critical faculties along with the scalp. There is also an interesting psychological component to all these treatments. Patients suffering from hair loss often want a routine, something visible, something tangible, that reassures them that they're actively fighting the condition. A beautifully packaged helmet used for a fixed period every evening provides a sense of control, and that ritual itself may improve adherence. But ritual, packaging, and technological appearance do not by themselves establish clinical efficacy. Low-level laser therapy may have an adjunctive role for patients who understand its limitations and are willing to use it consistently. However, it should not be presented as a replacement for better established, scientifically proven treatment for androgenic alopecia. The supplement market thrives because taking a capsule feels safe, simple, and proactive. However, androgenic alopecia is not usually caused by a deficiency of vitamins or other elements like biotin, zinc, or other vitamins. Supplements are more likely to help when a genuine deficiency exists. A review of biotin use for hair loss found little evidence for its routine use in people without biotin deficiency. Unnecessary supplementation is not automatically harmless. Excessive intake of certain nutrients by itself may contribute to hair loss or other medical issues, while high-dose biotin can interfere with important laboratory investigations. Reviews of nutritional hair loss, therefore, recommend identifying risk factors and documented deficiencies rather than prescribing supplements indiscriminately. Nutritional deficiencies should be identified and corrected, but supplementation should answer a demonstrated biological need, not merely a patient's understandable need to take something. A deficiency requires replacement. Androgenic alopecia, on the other hand, requires disease-specific treatment, and these are non-interchangeable concepts. Exosomes are currently one of the most heavily marketed treatments in hair loss and also in aesthetic medicine. They are small extracellular vesicles involved in communication between cells. Laboratory research suggests that exosomes may influence dermal papillae cells, follicular stem cells, angiogenesis, and signaling pathways associated with hair growth. That biology is exciting. But promising biology is not the same as proven clinical treatment. A recent systematic review concluded that exosome-based treatments for alopecia remain promising, but limited by small studies, inconsistent methodology, heterogeneous products, and inadequate long-term evidence. Different preparations may be derived from different cells, processed through different manufacturing systems, and contain different concentrations and molecular cargo. Therefore, even the word exosome does not describe a standardized treatment. At present, exosome treatment should be regarded as experimental rather than established treatment. The laboratory may be promising, but the marketing has run several laps ahead of medical evidence. So what is the final ranking? The evidence does not tell us that every patient must receive the same treatment. It tells us that treatment should be selected according to the diagnosis, evidence, suitability, safety, and long-term practicality. Finasteride, dutasteride, and minoxidil remain the best supported medical treatments for androgenic alopecia. Combination treatments, on the other hand, may improve outcome because they address different aspects of the disease. PRP, microneedling, and low-level light therapy may have adjunctive roles, but their effects are less predictable and the protocols are less standardized. Supplements are more rational when a genuine deficiency has been demonstrated. Exosomes and other regenerative treatments remain promising but insufficiently proven. Most importantly, a treatment should not be judged solely by a before and after photograph. A photograph demonstrates what may have happened to one individual. Controlled studies, on the other hand, help us to estimate what is likely to happen across many individuals. Hair loss treatment, therefore, should not be selected from a menu of promises. It should be selected from a hierarchy of evidence. And this may sound less glamorous than the latest miracle treatment you heard about, but science has never been a beauty contest. Have a nice day.